Let me start maybe with a quick role play for a moment. So if I were in the audience right now, I would be probably wondering how on earth do pancakes relate to the strategic paths that we draw across business, missions, and visions. So yeah, by the way, any pancake lovers? Anyone likes pancakes? Raise your hand. Oh yeah, we've got quite a few pancake lovers in the audience, which is great, because the confession that I have to make is that I'm a pancake person myself. And yeah, so there's sailors, there's pancakes, there's sailors, there's a ship, there's a captain to command the ship. So how do all those things come together? So let me connect the dots for you in a moment. But first, maybe let's quickly, for a moment, take a pause and just imagine for a moment that you are a captain of a medieval sailing ship and you are tasked with a mission to deliver precious goods across the unknown ocean. So what do you do? How do you even start this? What do you do first? What steps do you need to take in order to accomplish such mission? Like, what would be your vision for this? What strategy you might have for this? What kind of goals you would have to put for yourself, for your team? How would you even align the entire crew of the ship to get this accomplished? So those questions, they require some major thinking to get answered, and they're definitely worth answering, so that's for sure. So, yeah, how did pancakes arrive into all of this picture, into this story? Well, a few years ago, when we were working on a, yet another planning cycle for our company, we noticed some confusion across the team. So we wanted to get clarity and we wanted to get back to the basics. So we wanted to present all the layers of the planning process to the entire organization. So this, those layers, this process or this artifact is usually pictured as something as this pyramid that's behind myself that you can see. So usually there would be a mission, there would be a vision, there would be a strategy, there would be goals, there would be a roadmap. So those would be those ingredients. And pancakes. Well, so back then, someone in our team figured, okay, let's reimagine this artifact, this common artifact pictured as a strategy pyramid usually. Let's picture this as a stack of pancakes. So this idea stuck, it stayed with us, it worked well. So we used this idea and this, this picturesque version of this to navigate through this confusion, because while we have the familiar ingredients, those layers are sometimes messy. The connections between those layers they tend to be misunderstood, and we wanted to get this pictured in a way that would be hitting the audiences. And yeah, we've seen that there's a huge cognitive overload when we talk about all of this. So yeah, this is what we were presenting to the teams. And this is how this usually works. But for today, let's break down those layers and let's focus on only one of those, on potentially the most critical layer, the most critical piece of the puzzle of those layers, which is the strategy. And the strategy is answering the question of, okay, what's our plan? How do we win? How do we achieve this mission and vision that we have in front of us? And with this, let's get us going. So, how do we start? Let's actually, I would to say, how should we not start? I would even say, don't start with goals. I think this is one of the common misconceptions that exist and that people are making. I would say, don't start with goals. I would say, do start with challenges. So, just think about it for a moment. It might not be obvious. But it's something that's, again, pretty often misunderstood across the board. And the major difference here, sometimes even people tend to use those two words, goals and challenges, interchangeably when they mean the same thing, when actually there's a big difference, because goals are about outcomes that we are pursuing, And challenges are about the obstacles that are in between us being today and between those outcomes that we are pursuing. One example from the business might be, so there might be a goal, someone might have a goal, an organization might have a goal to grow by 20% in a specific market in the next year. That's a pretty specific goal, but it says nothing about, okay, what's in between you and you achieving this goal, so between you today and between you achieving this goal. The challenges, the actual challenges you might have in achieving such a goal. So potentially there's competition already in this market. You're already fighting a competition, so you might need to focus on specific aspects of how do you fight this competition. Or maybe there's new legislation coming in. There are some changes in laws that you need to accommodate. Maybe this is the biggest challenge that you have and that you should start fighting for in order to grow in this market. Or maybe it's just a brand new market for you entirely and you simply have no reach there. You are not reaching the customers and you need to think about how to expand in this market in the first place. So yeah, this would be one common misconception and something that I think we should be mindful about. So when we talk about my own journey, I started getting more deliberate and more aware of the strategic topics, I would say back in 2021. So when I started doing this, definitely the first thing I learned was this focus on the challenges, on solving those proper challenges, figuring out how to pick the challenges that I should be solving, the opportunities that we might be willing to pursue. I really love this quote. Back then I was using this in one of my presentations those few years ago. This was even before I got familiar with the books by Richard Rumelt, but this quote already stick with me. So bad strategy is the active avoidance of the hard work of crafting a good strategy. So just think about it. When you think about it, the realization might be that some kind of a strategy, there's always some kind of a strategy. It's rarely that there's actually no strategy at all, because people tend to create, to fulfill void with their own imagination, with their own creation. So if there's no good strategy coming from the leadership team, so there's something that people create in their own heads. So, and potentially, everyone has their own context, everyone has their own perception of the context of the reality around them. And this would result in complete misalignment. So lack of strategy and actually lack of this hard work that we would be putting in creating good strategy does not mean you don't have a strategy. It's even worse, because it means you have a bad strategy and it's a completely different strategy in everyone's head. So this is what I started understanding back then. What I was still completely not understanding properly. I was lacking clarity on this practical meaning of all of this. So I started understanding some of the concepts, but how do I put this into practice? How do I coin some meaningful effort, meaningful actions so that this can be of use for the broader organization? So this was back then. So it looks like creating good strategy is not easy. There are some challenges. So what the strategy even is in the first place? So the strategy creation, what's the creation of the strategy? This is the process of diagnosing the challenge and then creating a response to it. So think about it. There's some kind of process. The diagnosis is being mentioned there. And then we need to consciously and deliberately create responses to those challenges that are ahead of us or around us. So there's some kind of thinking process definitely behind it. It's not just some simple picking exercise. Because if you also consider our industry, the software industry, there's very rarely there would be something like, okay, I have option A, B, I just pick, I go left, I go right, and that's it. That's the end of my choices. Usually, we are building, this is a creative industry, right? So we are creating new products. We are in the industry that's creating new things out of nothing. And this creation, there's a design process as part of it. And think about the strategy, creating a strategy, there's very often unlimited pool of options in front of you of where can you invest, how you should invest, which directions, which paths should you pick. So this is a conscious, deliberate design process. It's not just a simple picking exercise. So back to my own journeys. If you fast forward a little bit to 2023, Back then, I got inspired by the Tesla strategy, which, by the way, this is something that's already 20 years old. But just for the purpose of inspiration, first starting maybe with the mission. In case of Tesla, this would be accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy. So interestingly, it doesn't even mention cars at all. And in my case, so I'm running the internal engineering organization at my company, it's Smart Recruiters. And this is a kind of a platform engineering organization where the primary customer of what we deliver are the product teams. Product is the whole product organization. So we are building the internal platform for the developers all over the company in order to get them faster. So our mission is accelerating engineering with reduced external cognitive load across those teams, across the product engineering teams. So about the strategy, in Tesla's case, the first step of the strategy was to build a high margin upmarket car, which would be a low production volume car. So that would be like a few number of units, relatively few number of units. Like the first car was the Tesla Roadster. They produced like 2,500 of them or so. And they needed high margins. They needed low volume because this was the first phase. They started experimenting with this. They wanted to get knowledge, get experience, get some money to get the whole machinery going, and also increase awareness across the industry on the electric cars in general. And this was pretty early in the days. So in my case, in internal engineering that I'm running, the first thing we've noticed was that, okay, we have so many ideas and we have so many opportunities and things that we can deliver, but we really are the first thing that we are lacking is capacity in our own team. And we had to stay lean, like there was not an option from business perspective to just keep infinitely growing the team. We had to keep the team lean. But we had a pretty high maintenance cost. So what we figured, we need to actively invest first, which is maybe sometimes not obvious, but we wanted to invest first into reducing this maintenance cost, into the keep the lights on, in order to then later on gain back this capacity to be able to reuse it. The next step, in Tesla's case, they basically started going down market into more mass production of the cheaper cars with lower margins, higher volumes, and they basically started expanding across the market. In our case, in my case, it was like a similar thinking. So, okay, we will, after the initial investment, we will get back some capacity, but at the same time, like part of this capacity constraints that we had was because of the maintenance and keep the lights work. The other the other factor was that we were, dealing with a lot of requests coming from product engineering teams. And the best possible way to deal with such requests is, in fact, to introduce a self-service capability, so that again you invest once. And then for any of the future incoming requests, you no longer have to deal with those requests because ideally there's both good documentation and good product services produced so that people can self-service themselves. And with this, you get back additional capacity that you can keep reinvesting on your own. So with this, in Tesla's case, at the same time, they also wanted to keep providing the zero emissions options, powering options, because as you keep increasing the demand for electricity, of course, you also need to keep somehow providing the clean energy, ideally. In our case, we wanted to reinvest this capacity into being able to more proactively manage how do we further improve the developer experience across the entire organization, and how do we keep speeding up engineering across the whole organization. So this was my thinking back then. So in short, in summary, so a bit of inspiration by one of the industry strategies. I definitely improved myself the understanding of the focus of the stages. There's some kind of a stage process in all of this. What I was still doing wrong back then, I was completely mixing up the layers from this, this whole pyramid or the stack of pancakes, if you say, if you wish. Like which part is the vision, like which is only the desire that we have, which is the outcome that we are chasing, which of those is an actual plan, which of those is the strategy that sets the specific direction, some constraints within which we should be optimizing our organization, and which of those are some goals that we are pursuing. So with this, moving forward, again, even more and more, as you, even despite one is, actively digging into these topics of strategies and actively rolling them out across the organization. It looks like, creating a strategy, a good strategy, is something that's hard. What's the hard part of the strategy? As Richard Rumelt says also, it's distilling the broad intent into actions you can take now. So there's kind of a distillation process happening, because usually there's abundance of factors, of metrics all over the place. We definitely need to do first the hard work of collecting all the metrics, and then distilling something, and distilling this broad intents that you might have to deal with all those issues around you, all those opportunities also around you. And the other important part that's not obvious is the actions you can take now, meaning there's some kind of urgency, some kind of sense of starting this work immediately. Like the one misconception I myself also used to have, like strategy, like usually there would be a longer time horizon when we think about strategies. So probably there's time to start acting and fulfilling, realizing the strategy. But actually no, like now you should really think about strategies as something that starts being super relevant as soon as today, tomorrow. So what are the common problems with strategies and with creating good strategies? The first thing I was already referring to is this, mixing up efforts and outcomes, the direction, the path that you're willing to take versus the outcome that you are pursuing. So that's this basic first initial problem, confusing strategies and strategic goals. This definitely is not the same thing, and sometimes people just put those strategic goals in front of the organization, and they think, okay, we now have the strategy because we have a set of goals, and we call those goals strategic because they are important for the organization, so that's the strategy, go for it, chase. The other thing is focus, or to be more precise, lack of focus. Very often organizations are missing focus when thinking about strategies, designing strategies. And this is pretty natural to some extent, because there are so many options in front of us. Like, there are so many stakeholders usually in the organizations. People want to deliver as much as possible, satisfy all the stakeholders, pursue all the possible opportunities. But sometimes this results in, creating a laundry list of wishes instead of an actual strategy. So this is also something that we should be mindful about and be super conscious about. So yeah, with this, what a good strategy really is. Like, how do we get to creating an actual good strategy? How can we get around this? Well, another quote from Richard Rumelt: the core of strategy work is discovering the critical factors in a situation and designing a way of coordinating and focusing actions to deal with those factors. So again, we appreciate that usually there's some kind of circumstances around us. We are in a context. We are always in some kind of a context. We need to be super mindful and cautious about the context that we are in. That's the first part. Then there's usually multiple factors playing a role, and there's so many different items, aspects that we need to take into account. And we need to design. Again, there's this design process that's coming in. With this design process, we need to create an optimal way to be dealing with those challenges, and we need a very specific actions with which we would be able to deal with those factors. So in summary, we can summarize this. We should be able to apply strength to the most promising opportunity. Be mindful about this. So we would be picking a specific, a very narrow set of opportunities and applying our strength there. So what concepts could help us in this journey of creating good strategy? So again, Richard Rumelt introduces several of them. One of those concepts is addressable strategic challenge. So that's something that, those are challenges in front of us, and there would be two dimensions where we should be looking at the challenges across those two dimensions. The first one is importance. I think this one is pretty natural, pretty obvious. Like, I think naturally feel that we shouldn't be dealing with unimportant items when we talk about strategies, when we are creating strategies. But the other one, I think this one gets overlooked way too often, is this addressability one. Which means that even if the challenge that you are dealing with is super critical, super important for the organization, but there's no way that in a context in a timeline applicable to our current context, if there's no way that we would be able to deal with this, like if dealing with this specific challenge would require us like unrealistic change of resources that we have available, for example, then this is a clear signal that we should not be actually pursuing this particular challenge, even if it is super important. So this is something not very obvious. And when we are selecting the challenges that we should be focusing on within the strategy, in the strategy that we are creating, then again, we should be looking for maximizing the value across both of those dimensions. Like one without the other doesn't make sense. They have to come in pair. So this is something that's really important. And now the clue of this, the core of this is something that Rumelt calls the kernel of the strategy. And it consists of 3 elements. So there would be a diagnosis, there would be a guiding policy, or many of those, sometimes could be multiple, and there would be a set of coherent actions. What do we mean by this? What does it mean? So step by step about diagnosis. So think about it, if you are in this medieval ship sailing and you basically someone gets sick, and there would be a doctor coming in. There would be first collecting the facts about what's happening, what was the situation, what are the symptoms, etc. And then there would be some kind of a diagnosis that he would be putting, based on all those conditions and all those factors that he can come in. So the diagnosing is, again, compiling the facts that you have, understanding the context, sometimes in case of businesses, of course, understanding the higher level business context, and taking all the circumstances into account, figuring out what's going on, what are the actual challenges. And then you would be introducing some guiding policies, which would be your means of channeling very specific actions in a very specific directions. The only maybe tricky part is you want to be both super precise in terms of like how the given policy might look like, but the way of creating this policy or the content of this policy should of course naturally still leave a lot of room for the teams, for the members of your organization to have some autonomy and to have the empowerment, to let them be empowered as well. So you can think about those guiding policies as corridors that have very tough walls, but there are still corridors with a potentially broad circumference. So the last important bit is the set of coherent actions. And again, as Rumelt puts it, this is not just some implementation detail, and it's not about some getting from the strategy level down to the local items. This is actually about being very precise in identifying what needs to be done in order for the policies, for example, to start being effective, and so that you can start realizing and enforcing those policies across your organization, but also how to deal with those challenges. So sometimes those would be one-time actions, sometimes those could be ongoing processes, but those should be very specific, and again, something that you can literally start working on today, and you should actually do so. So for myself, again, fast forward a little bit to 2024, to last year, generally understanding these concepts, working on those concepts also with the rest of the leadership team of the organization of my engineering organization. This was the true, real aha moment for myself when I started understanding, okay, I've never really seen anything that would be both precise and be both actionable for me. Usually I would be just, again, handed a set of goals, and now I'm handed being given a framework. I'm seeing a framework that I can start using to be dealing with the challenges in front of me in a way that's really allowing me to bring the actions and to change those on a daily basis. So some examples, when we were working on those, for example, one diagnosis that we had was, again, about this maintenance cost and the keep the light on costs. We've noticed that this is so high, so several things we introduced. We introduced a policy of being super precise and conscious, introducing a framework for build by partner decisions, which we were not so precise in the previous years about it. And then that's on one hand, and on the other hand, when it comes to action, we introduced an exercise, basically an immediate exercise of reviewing all the domains, reviewing all the components of the system, and identifying those that are basically a commodity that we should not be building and keeping in-house, that we should already commoditize and just externalize those. The other one would be the other example on the policy level. We noticed that we have a long lead times for the epics, for the projects that we're delivering to customers, and we wanted to do something about it. So we introduced the well-known concept of weekly meeting the work, and this was a policy to immediately start weekly meeting the work that teams are working on. This was also something that could be immediately taking effect. So these are some learnings that I had. The one issue, the one problem that I was still, seeing is this addressability. Here, one example could be we also wanted to introduce a policy of introducing the ROI framework, return of investment, making sure that we always are fully aware and we have some standardized way of calculating what's the investment, what would be the return of it, or to make better decisions, better informed decisions on the priorities of different projects. And we pretty much failed in terms of standardizing this into a very specific framework. So the addressability bit was not really analyzed deeply enough. This turned out to be too difficult, basically. So just one example that this addressability is not always as easy as you might think. Another aspect of this entire picture is the difference between strategy and tactics. Sometimes this boundary might be a bit blurry. Sometimes you might get confused on this. And both should apply immediately. Like think about an example of a military reference when there's a battle in the middle of the ocean, like some two fleets are fighting each other. So both the admiral managing the entire fleets that would be fighting on both sides, as well as a lieutenant that's managing a single small unit, a single small ship that's part of the fleet, they would be both making and taking decisions immediately on the go as it happens. Sometimes the decision might be, okay, we are sending the entire fleet to this battle versus there's another battle preparing, going to happen somewhere else. So sometimes those decisions would be, spanning the entire world, but still those would be immediate decisions that you might be taking. So both admiral on the strategy level, those decisions, those actions would be taken immediately, and on the tactical level as well. So the difference is not in the time horizon or in the when those are happening. The difference is purely on the level of abstraction, on the scope, whether this is like a huge scope that you are thinking about, that you are taking into account, or whether this is some localized scope. So this is the core of the difference, not really about being long-term versus short-term when we talk about strategy and tactics. So with my journey there, when we switch to this year, the latest learnings I would have from all of this, I definitely also got a better understanding of the strategies, hierarchies, like what's a strategy, what's a tactic. Like if you have a corporate strategy, there would be some kind of a business strategy, a product strategy, you might have engineering strategy, like how those should relate to each other. Also, like one concept, one idea is that if you in your organization, if in different functions, different departments of your company, there's not really clear strategies in other companies, then you shouldn't probably be building those strategies for those other departments, but it's actually still a useful exercise to try creating your local private version of the strategy, just to understand better what these other departments are actually doing, what challenges are they facing currently, what goals they are facing. Sometimes if this is not obvious, then creating this mind map in this artifact for yourself in the private version, this is always something that's going to be helpful. And I myself, I'm still figuring out, I'm still thinking about the time horizon, when we are creating a strategy, should a strategy be applicable to what period, quarter strategy for a quarter, for a year, for a few years. So maybe a quick exercise, if the organizations in which you are working, who's currently having an organization who has a strategy for a single quarter? Anyone? Barely anyone. Anyone whose organization is having a strategy for a year? Okay, there are some hands for a year. Anyone who's having a multi-year, 2-3 year strategy? Okay, more hands, I can see more hands. So yeah, as you see, there are actually different answers. And the truth is there's no single universal answer, like what is the optimal time span for a strategy. Definitely not in a natural way. We are thinking about a bit longer strategies because usually bigger initiatives are part of the strategy, so it takes time to realize them. But there's no single rule of thumb or like how long, how much time horizon should a strategy cover. This always depends on a specific context of your organization, your company, the market in which you are, the place or in the life cycle of the business that you are in. So there's no single answer, and I myself I'm figuring out like what's the optimal solution to this in a given circumstances. So just summarizing and looking ahead, my own conclusion is that the strategy is. Those are pretty similar to Agile. Like everyone has heard about it. Everyone has been doing and dealing with strategies in some way, as with Agile. But I think that very few tend to do it really, really right when we talk about the context of the entire organizations and the whole world. So that's the one thing. That's the one realization. I can just repeat, like, don't start with goals, start with challenges. This is something that's really not obvious and really helpful when we are creating the strategies. And this framework that I've just briefly scratched the surface of this framework of creating the good strategy. So this concept is coming from Richard Rumelt's books, and I can highly recommend those books. There's a Bad Strategy, Good Strategy from him, and there's The Crux, the second book from him. There's a lot of good examples, real life examples. And yeah, you can also take a look at this. I'm also happy to take any questions. You can find me also afterwards. But I think this framework is, at least for myself, this was an eye-opener in terms of what strategy really is, what strategy could and should be, versus how sometimes organizations tend to think about strategies. So with this, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm happy to take any questions if we have any time.
Thank you. So we unlearned something. And are you up for a challenge of Q&A, Mateusz?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So there are tricky ones, I must confess. So, for example, the first one is, what did you completely stop doing because it wasn't aligned with your strategy?
So, yeah, that's a good question. For example, so in my case, in my organization, we have multiple domains. And sometimes this is basically natural that you are pursuing, one initiative or different initiative because I myself, I'm running 5 teams, and each of those 5 teams, each of those actually covers multiple domains. So this is pretty natural that we want to be delivering items across different domains, and this goes pretty natural that this one is built into the nature of the size and the coverage and ownership of my organization, of my team, that we have to be picking on a daily basis. So, for example, I don't know, for some time, there's one team that's covering both delivery pipelines as well as the developer experience, and we have to constantly pick between those two areas for the single team.
Thank you. And another difficult one. So can you provide an example of a nice idea that you did abandon because it was not addressable?
So I provided this one about the ROI, which, by the way, doesn't mean that we don't want. So it doesn't mean two things. It doesn't mean that we are not constantly thinking about ROI, because this is naturally an important concept for anything that anyone is putting their efforts in. And the second one, it doesn't also mean that we don't want to get back to this in the future, but somehow we need to figure out how to balance, the idealized version of having a unified framework of turning any project into dollars at the end, like into identifying how many dollars stand behind every framework, versus doing something that just realistically allowing us to make better data-driven decisions, and especially in the technical domains of engineering productivity, this kind of domains, it's sometimes very, very hard to turn a specific project into a very precise number of dollars at the end. So this is something that we, for example, had to abandon for some time.
Now, the provocative question. I quote, "Isn't your internal engineering team not only help to accelerate, but also may become bottleneck or even single point of failure?"
That's a good question. Nobody wants to be in a position of being a single point of failure for sure. So in general, the model that we are using in the organization, we are building a pretty extensive abstraction layers on top of like the lower levels, foundations on the cloud, for example, and the infrastructure that the product teams are utilizing. And yeah, the idea, of course, is that we should move ourselves out of the equation. Like we should never be the bottlenecks. And I think we are on the good trajectory there, because in the past it was actually the way that a product team simply wanted to set up a new database. So there was a ticket coming to one of my teams. This ticket was sometimes sitting for weeks, and then puff, you have a database now. And now there's this self-service model that we provided capability, we provided platform capability, that if a product engineering team, they want to create a database, there's a simple instruction, and they can do this on their own within minutes, basically. So this is the model that we are applying. So allowing the teams to self-serve when there's a capability that can be reused across different teams. Sometimes, of course, there are examples, use cases that are one-off. There's a very specialized domain. I don't know, for example, you have only one team using this kind of technology, or the other team that's only managing this. So in those cases, of course, we don't want to prematurely centralize. But for those cases that, again, there is some kind of a reuse across the broader organization, that we do want to centralize, but we also do want to remove ourselves from the equation, from being on the critical path.
Thank you so much. And we will close with this one. Please make some noise for Mateusz Grabowski.
Thank you very much.